The rain that changed everything. Sometimes, one brave decision doesn't just save a life, it uncovers a truth that was never meant to be found. Rain poured relentlessly over the city. The streets shimmered beneath yellow streetlights, while thunder rolled across the dark sky. Most people had already locked themselves inside warm homes, grateful to be away from the freezing storm. But not everyone had that luxury. 26-year-old Zara Williams pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders as she hurried down the nearly empty sidewalk. Her shoes were soaked. Her fingers were numb. She had just finished another 12-hour shift at St. Anne's Community Hospital, where she worked as an emergency room nurse. It had been one of those days that never seemed to end. A construction worker with a crushed leg, a little girl suffering from pneumonia, an elderly man who had died before his family could say goodbye. Those faces stayed with Zara long after every shift. That was both her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. She cared too much. Her coworkers often teased her. "You'll never survive in emergency medicine if you keep carrying everyone's pain home." She would always smile and answer the same way. "If I stop caring, I stop being the person I want to be." Tonight was no different. She glanced at her watch. 10:47 p.m. Only another 15-minute walk until home. She dreamed of a hot shower, a cup of tea, and finally getting some sleep. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. A few miles away, a black SUV sped across Riverside Bridge. Inside the vehicle, a little boy sat quietly in the back seat. 5-year-old Ethan Harrison hugged a stuffed dinosaur close to his chest. He looked out the rain-covered window. "Daddy, when are we going home?" The man driving smiled without taking his eyes off the road. "Soon, buddy. We'll be there before you know it." At least, that was the plan. Suddenly, bright headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. A dark sedan was following them. Too closely. The driver frowned. He changed lanes. The sedan followed. He accelerated. So did the other car. His heartbeat quickened. He reached for his phone. "I think there." Before he could finish, bang! Something slammed into the back of the SUV. Ethan screamed. The SUV swerved violently across the wet bridge. Back on the sidewalk, Zara heard tires screeching through the storm. She looked up. Time seemed to slow. The SUV spun out of control. Once. Twice. Then smashed through the bridge's guardrail. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. The front half of the SUV dangled over the raging river below. For one terrifying moment, everything became silent. Then people started shouting. "Oh my God! Call 911! Someone's inside!" Cars stopped. Pedestrians gathered. Within seconds, nearly 20 people stood watching the wreck. Many pulled out their phones. Several began recording. No one moved closer. The damaged bridge groaned loudly. One wrong movement, and the vehicle would plunge into the river. Then Zara heard it. A tiny voice. "Help!" She froze. The voice came again. "Please! I'm scared." A child. Without thinking, Zara threw her bag onto the pavement and ran toward the hanging SUV. Someone grabbed her arm. "Don't! It'll collapse!" Another man shouted. "Wait for the firefighters. They're on the way." But Zara kept running. Every instinct inside her screamed that there wasn't enough time. She reached the twisted guardrail. The SUV rocked dangerously. Rainwater poured over the windshield. Through the cracked side window, she saw him, a little boy. His forehead was bleeding. His seatbelt had jammed. Tears streamed down his face. He couldn't have been older than 5. When their eyes met, he whispered one heartbreaking word. "Please." Zara's fear disappeared. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'm here." She pulled on the driver's door. Locked. She tried the back door. It wouldn't budge. The bridge groaned again. The SUV slipped another inch toward the river. The crowd screamed. "It's falling." A firefighter's siren echoed in the distance. Too far away. Too late. Zara searched desperately for something, anything, that could break the glass. Her eyes landed on a broken piece of steel lying beside the damaged guardrail. She grabbed it, raised it high, and swung with every ounce of strength she had. Crash! The window shattered. Glass scattered across the seats. Ignoring the sharp pieces cutting into her hands, Zara climbed halfway into the SUV. She reached for Ethan. His tiny hands clung tightly to hers. "It's okay," she whispered. "Close your eyes." I won't let anything happen to you. She pulled at the seatbelt. It refused to move. She pulled harder. Still nothing. The buckle had been crushed in the impact. The SUV lurched again. The front wheels slipped farther over the edge. The river roared beneath them. Every second mattered. Zara looked around frantically. Then she spotted it. A small emergency rescue cutter attached beneath the dashboard. She stretched as far as she could. Just a little. Farther. Her fingertips touched it. She grabbed the cutter. One quick motion. The seatbelt snapped free. She wrapped Ethan tightly in her arms. Hold on to me. I promise. We're getting out. As Zara climbed back through the broken window, the SUV groaned one final time. The crowd gasped. The bridge shook beneath her feet. One more step. One more. She jumped onto solid ground. Less than 2 seconds later, the SUV tore through the broken guardrail and plunged into the raging river. Boom! Water exploded into the air. The crowd stood frozen. Then applause erupted. People cheered. Some cried. Others stared at Zara in complete disbelief. Ethan buried his face in her shoulder, trembling uncontrollably. You saved me. Before Zara could answer, she noticed something strange. Across the bridge, the same black sedan that had chased the SUV was parked in the shadows. Its headlights switched on. For just a second, someone inside watched her. Then, the sedan disappeared into the rain. Zara frowned. Something about this accident didn't feel like an accident at all. She had just saved a little boy's life. She didn't know it yet, but that single act of courage had awakened a secret that had been buried for 25 years. The photograph that changed everything. The flashing red and blue lights painted the rain-soaked bridge in a sea of color. Police officers rushed to secure the area. Firefighters searched the river below, hoping to find the driver of the SUV. Paramedics surrounded Zara and Ethan, but Zara barely noticed any of it. She was still trying to catch her breath. Her hands were bleeding from the shattered glass, and her clothes were soaked, yet her eyes remained fixed on the river where the SUV had disappeared. One question echoed in her mind. Who had been driving that vehicle? Ethan refused to let go of her hand. His tiny fingers clung tightly to hers. A paramedic smiled gently. You're safe now, buddy. The little boy shook his head. I don't want her to leave. Zara knelt beside him and smiled warmly. I'll stay until your family gets here. Ethan looked at her with frightened eyes. There was another car. Zara frowned. What do you mean? The black car. It kept following us. Before he could say another word, a police officer interrupted. Miss Williams, I'm Detective Michael Carter. I need to ask you a few questions. Michael Carter was in his early 40s. Calm, observant, the kind of detective who noticed details most people ignored. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Zara described everything, from hearing the crash to breaking the window and rescuing Ethan. When she mentioned the black sedan, Michael's expression changed. A black sedan? Yes. It was parked across the bridge after the rescue. It drove away before anyone else noticed. Michael wrote something in his notebook. Interesting. We found tire marks behind the SUV. It may not have been an accident after all. An hour later, a convoy of luxury vehicles arrived at the bridge. One black limousine stopped near the police line. The rear door opened. A tall man in an expensive dark coat stepped out. His face was pale with fear. The moment Ethan saw him, he shouted, "Dad!" The man ran forward and hugged his son tightly. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he looked at Zara. His eyes were filled with gratitude. You saved my son. My name is Daniel Harrison. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Zara smiled softly. You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad he's safe. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. There aren't many people who would risk their life for a stranger. The next morning, the entire city knew Zara's name. News channels replayed the rescue over and over again. Social media called her the Angel of Riverside Bridge. Reporters gathered outside St. Anne's Community Hospital. Patients applauded when she walked through the entrance. Her co-workers hugged her proudly. Even the hospital director presented her with flowers. But despite all the attention, Zara couldn't stop thinking about the black sedan, or Ethan's words. It kept following us. That evening, she finally returned home. Her small apartment felt unusually quiet. She placed her keys on the kitchen counter. removed her wet jacket, made herself a cup of tea. Just as she sat down, someone knocked on the door. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. She opened it. No one was there. Only a small brown envelope lay on the welcome mat. There was no stamp, no address, no sender's name. Only one word written in elegant handwriting. Zara. Her heartbeat quickened. She looked down the hallway. Empty. Whoever had left it was already gone. She carried the envelope inside, carefully opened it. Only one photograph fell onto the table. It looked at least 25 years old. The picture showed a young woman standing beside an old lighthouse. She held a baby in her arms. The woman smiled at the camera, but her eyes looked frightened. Zara stared at the baby. Something felt strangely familiar. Then she noticed it. Around the baby's neck hung a tiny silver necklace, exactly like the one Zara had worn since childhood. She instinctively touched the necklace around her own neck. It couldn't be a coincidence. She turned the photograph over. Written on the back were 6 words. The truth belongs to the girl. No signature. Nothing else. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She searched through an old wooden box where she kept childhood memories. Inside were faded birthday cards, school certificates, old family photographs, and one adoption document. According to the papers, she had been left at St. Mary's Children's Home when she was less than a year old. There was no information about her biological parents. No names. No history. Only one note. Child found wearing silver necklace. She whispered to herself, "Who am I?" The next morning, Zara drove to visit her adoptive parents. They lived in a quiet town just outside the city. Her mother, Margaret, welcomed her with a warm hug. "We saw you on television. We're so proud of you." Her father, Robert, smiled proudly. "You've always had a brave heart." After lunch, Zara placed the photograph on the dining table. The room fell silent. Margaret's smile disappeared. Robert slowly removed his glasses. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "It was left outside my apartment." Margaret looked as though she had seen a ghost. "You've never seen this before?" Zara shook her head. "No." Robert exchanged a worried glance with his wife. Then he stood up, walked to an old bookshelf, and removed a locked metal box. He placed it on the table. "There is something we've never told you." Zara felt her heart pounding. Robert unlocked the box. Inside was another envelope, yellow with age. Across the front, written in fading blue ink, were the words, "Give this to Zara, only if the past ever comes looking for her." Zara stared at the envelope. Her hands trembled as she slowly reached for it. She had no idea that opening this letter would begin a journey into a secret buried for 25 years. The letter, the orphanage, and the first shocking truth. The old envelope trembled in Zara's hands. It looked as though it had been waiting for this moment for decades. The paper had turned yellow with age. The edges were worn. The blue ink on the front had almost faded away. "Give this to Zara, only if the past ever comes looking for her." The room was silent. Only the ticking of the old wall clock could be heard. Zara looked at her adoptive parents. "Who wrote this?" Robert took a deep breath. "We don't know." Margaret gently held Zara's hand. "We've kept this secret for 25 years. You deserve to know everything." 25 years earlier, Robert stared out the window as memories came rushing back. It was a cold winter morning. Your mother and I had been trying to adopt a child for almost 8 years. Then one day, we received a phone call from St. Mary's Children's Home. They told us there was a baby girl waiting for a family. Margaret smiled sadly. "The moment we saw you, we knew you were our daughter. You smiled at me. I'll never forget that smile." Tears filled her eyes. But before we signed the adoption papers, the director of the orphanage handed us this envelope. Robert nodded. "She told us never to open it. She said, if no one ever comes looking for the child, let her live a peaceful life." So we respected that wish. We locked the envelope away. And we prayed you'd never need it. The letter. Zara slowly broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten page. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as though it had been written under great pressure. "If you are reading this, it means the past has finally found you. My name cannot be written here. There are people who would kill to erase the truth. Your real family loved you more than anything in this world. You were never abandoned. You were hidden. Trust only one person. Mrs. Helen." She knows what happened. Do not trust anyone wearing the raven ring. If you want the truth, go back to where your story began. St. Mary's Children's Home. The letter ended there. No signature. No explanation. Only questions. Back to the orphanage. The next morning, Zara drove to St. Mary's Children's Home. The building looked exactly as she remembered. The same brick walls. The same iron gate. The same old oak tree standing in the courtyard. Children laughed as they played outside. For a moment, Zara remembered being one of them. She remembered scraped knees, birthday cakes, school plays, and wondering why every other child had parents who looked like them. She had always loved Robert and Margaret. They had given her everything. But deep inside, she had always wondered where she truly came from. An elderly woman stepped out of the building. Her white hair was neatly tied back. Her warm smile hadn't changed despite the passing years. Zara! The woman smiled. I'd know those eyes anywhere. Zara recognized her immediately. Mrs. Helen! The former director embraced her warmly. My little girl! I've missed you! A promise made 25 years ago. Inside the office, Mrs. Helen prepared 2 cups of tea. She looked at the letter, then at the photograph Zara had brought with her. Her smile slowly faded. So, it has finally begun. Zara leaned forward. You know this woman? Mrs. Helen closed her eyes for a moment. Yes. I met her only once. It was the longest night of my life. It was raining, almost exactly like the night you rescued that little boy. She arrived carrying you in her arms. She was terrified. Her clothes were torn. There was blood on her shoulder. She kept looking behind her, convinced someone was following her. Mrs. Helen's voice became softer. She begged me to protect you. She said, Please, don't tell anyone my daughter is here. I asked her who she was. She refused to answer. I asked who was chasing her. She simply whispered, The raven will find us if they know she's alive. The necklace. Mrs. Helen reached into an old wooden drawer. She removed a faded cloth pouch. Inside was a tiny silver key. I've kept this for 25 years. The woman told me to give it to you if you ever returned. Zara stared at it. What does it open? Mrs. Helen smiled sadly. I don't know. She never told me. Another clue. Mrs. Helen walked to an old filing cabinet. After searching for several minutes, she pulled out a dusty folder. I thought these records had disappeared. Inside was an admission form from 25 years ago. Most of the information had been blacked out. Name unknown. Mother unknown. Address unknown. But one section remained untouched. Item found with child. Silver necklace. Below it, someone had written a single address by hand. Black Harbor Lighthouse. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. The lighthouse from the photograph. Mrs. Helen nodded. I believe that's where your mother wanted you to go. Someone was watching. As Zara left the orphanage, she had no idea she wasn't alone. Across the street, a man sat inside a black sedan. He lowered his binoculars, picked up a phone, and quietly said, She's going to the lighthouse. A cold voice answered from the other end. Then don't let her find what's hidden there. The call ended. The black sedan slowly started its engine and followed Zara from a distance. The road to Black Harbor. The lighthouse stood on a lonely cliff nearly 2 hours outside the city. The drive felt endless. Dark clouds gathered once again. The ocean crashed violently against the rocks below. As Zara parked her car, she noticed something strange. Fresh tire tracks. Someone else had been there recently. She looked around. The place was completely deserted, or so it seemed. Taking a deep breath, she held the small silver key tightly in her hand and stepped toward the abandoned lighthouse. She had no idea that before the sun set, she would uncover the first real piece of the truth. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was already waiting for her. The hidden box inside the lighthouse. The wind howled across the cliffs as Zara stood in front of Black Harbor Lighthouse. The towering stone structure looked abandoned. Its windows were broken. Its white paint had peeled away years ago. The iron door swayed back and forth with every gust of wind, producing a slow, haunting creak. For a moment, Zara hesitated. The place felt wrong, almost as if it had been waiting for her. She tightened her grip on the small silver key Mrs. Helen had given her. If my mother wanted me here, I have to know why. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. A place frozen in time. Dust covered everything. Old wooden furniture lay broken across the floor. Spider webs stretched from wall to wall. The air smelled of salt, damp wood, and forgotten memories. A narrow spiral staircase wrapped around the inside of the lighthouse, disappearing into darkness above. Zara switched on the flashlight from her phone. Its beam cut through the darkness. She climbed slowly. Each step echoed through the empty tower. Step, step, step. Halfway up, she noticed something strange. One stair looked newer than the others. She knelt down and examined it. There was a tiny keyhole hidden beneath years of dust. Her heart skipped a beat. She reached into her pocket. The silver key. It fit perfectly. With a soft click, the wooden step unlocked. Inside was a small metal box. Its surface was rusty, but it was still sealed. Zara carefully lifted it out. A voice behind her. Before she could open the box, a calm voice echoed from the darkness. I wondered how long it would take you to find it. Zara spun around. A man stood near the staircase. He looked to be in his late 60s. Gray hair, a weathered face, a long dark coat. He carried no weapon, only a walking cane, yet something about him commanded attention. Who are you? Zara asked. The man looked at the metal box in her hands. My name is Thomas Reed. I was your mother's closest friend. Can she trust him? Zara instinctively stepped back. How do I know you're telling the truth? Thomas smiled sadly. You don't. But your mother believed one day you would come here. He slowly reached into his coat pocket. Zara tensed. Instead of a weapon, he pulled out an old photograph. It showed the same young woman from the mysterious picture. She stood beside Thomas, both smiling. In her arms, she held a baby. The baby wore the same silver necklace. Thomas handed Zara the photograph. I've carried this picture every day for 25 years. I promised your mother that if you ever came looking for the truth, I would help you. Elena Brooks. My mother's name. What was it? Thomas looked at her with gentle eyes. Elena Brooks. Hearing those words felt strange. For 26 years, Zara had never known the name of the woman who gave her life. She whispered it quietly. Elena! Thomas smiled. She was one of the bravest people I've ever known. The hidden box. Thomas nodded toward the metal box. Open it. The rusty lock broke easily. Inside were several old photographs. A baby's hospital bracelet, a leather journal, and one sealed envelope. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, For my daughter. Zara's hands began to shake. She carefully unfolded the letter. Her mother's words, My dearest Zara, if you're reading this, then you survived. That means my greatest wish came true. First, I need you to know something. I never abandoned you. Every decision I made, every tear I cried, every sacrifice was to keep you alive. There are people who wanted to erase our family forever. I couldn't let that happen. If Thomas is with you, trust him. He is the only man who never betrayed me. Inside the journal is the beginning of the truth. Finish what I couldn't. I love you. More than words could ever say. Mom. By the time Zara reached the end, tears blurred the page. She had imagined this moment her entire life, yet nothing had prepared her for the reality. The journal. Thomas carefully picked up the leather journal. This belonged to your mother. It contains everything she discovered. The first pages described Elena's work as an investigative financial analyst. She had uncovered suspicious money transfers involving a charitable organization called the Raven Foundation. Millions of dollars had disappeared through fake charities, shell companies, and secret offshore accounts. At first, she believed it was ordinary financial fraud. She was wrong. The deeper she investigated, the more dangerous it became. The first betrayal. Thomas turned another page. There was a team of 4 people investigating the Raven Foundation. Your mother, myself, a journalist named Olivia Grant, and a lawyer named Richard Cole. At least, that's what we believed. He lowered his eyes. We trusted Richard. He had access to confidential legal records. He claimed he wanted to expose the corruption. But we didn't know. He was secretly working for them. A chilling discovery. Just then, something slipped from the journal. A folded newspaper clipping. Its headline read, Investigative Journalist Killed in Car Accident. Thomas sighed. Olivia Grant. It wasn't an accident. She was murdered 2 weeks after discovering the truth. Zara felt a chill. Then my mother. Thomas nodded slowly. She realized she was next. Someone is still watching. Outside the lighthouse, a black SUV stopped behind Zara's car. 3 men stepped out. Each wore dark clothing. One of them spoke quietly into an earpiece. "She's inside." Another looked toward the lighthouse. "What about the old man?" The leader smiled coldly. "Neither of them leaves with those documents." Inside, Thomas suddenly looked toward the window. His face turned pale. "We have to go. Now." Zara frowned. "What happened?" Thomas pulled back the curtain, just enough to look outside. 3 armed men were climbing the hill toward the lighthouse. "They found us." He looked directly into Zara's eyes. "The hunt isn't over. It's just beginning." The secret hidden inside the silver necklace. The 3 men moved quickly through the heavy rain. Their black jackets blended into the darkness. Each of them carried a flashlight. One carried a handgun. Another spoke quietly into a radio. "They're still inside. Don't let them escape." Thomas immediately closed the curtain. His face had turned pale. "They found us much sooner than I expected." Zara looked toward the staircase. "Who are they?" Thomas answered without hesitation. "Men who work for the Raven Foundation. They've spent 25 years destroying every piece of evidence your mother collected." He looked directly into Zara's eyes. "And now they've come for you. No way out." The old lighthouse had only one main entrance. The men were already climbing the stone steps outside. Zara's heart raced. "There has to be another way." Thomas nodded. "There is, but almost no one knows about it." He grabbed the leather journal and the metal box. "Follow me." Instead of heading downstairs, Thomas climbed higher, all the way to the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse. The circular room overlooked the crashing ocean below. Rain slammed against the broken windows. Thomas pushed aside an old cabinet. Hidden behind it was a narrow wooden hatch. He opened it. A steep iron ladder disappeared into darkness. This tunnel was built over 100 years ago. "It leads to the cliffs behind the lighthouse. We'll have one chance." The chase begins. As Zara climbed down the ladder, loud voices echoed through the lighthouse. "They're on the top floor. Move!" Footsteps thundered up the spiral staircase. Thomas closed the hatch just as the first man reached the lantern room. A loud crash echoed above them. "They're gone! Search everywhere." The tunnel was cold, damp, and barely wide enough to crawl through. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air smelled of earth and salt. For nearly 10 minutes, they crawled in complete darkness. Finally, a faint light appeared ahead. Thomas pushed open another hatch. Fresh air rushed inside. They had reached the cliffs. Far below, powerful waves crashed against the rocks. For the moment, they were safe. A safe house. Thomas drove them to a small wooden cabin deep inside Pine Ridge Forest. It looked simple from the outside, but inside, it was filled with old maps, filing cabinets, newspaper clippings, and photographs connected by red strings on a large wall. Zara stared in amazement. "You've been investigating all these years?" Thomas nodded. "I never stopped. I promised your mother I would protect the truth." He pointed to dozens of photographs. Many faces were crossed out with red ink. "They're gone. Some disappeared. Some died under mysterious circumstances. And some joined the people they once fought." The silver necklace. Thomas looked at the necklace around Zara's neck. "May I see it?" She removed it carefully. He turned the tiny silver pendant over several times, then smiled. "Just as I thought." "What?" "This isn't just a necklace. It's a key." Using a tiny pin from his desk, Thomas gently pressed a nearly invisible button on the side. Click! The pendant opened. Zara gasped. Inside was a tiny memory chip. She stared at it in disbelief. "I've worn this my entire life, and never knew." Thomas smiled. "Your mother always planned for this day." The hidden files. Thomas inserted the memory chip into his old laptop. The screen flickered. A password appeared. "Access denied." Zara sighed. "We're too late." Thomas shook his head. "No." He pointed toward the journal. "Your mother never did anything without leaving clues." Together, they searched every page. Hours passed. Finally, Zara noticed something strange. The first letter of every chapter had been circled. She wrote them down. E-L-E-N-A. Then more letters followed. B-R-O-O-K. S. The complete message read, Elena Brooks never surrendered. Thomas smiled. Try the first 2 words. Zara typed, Elena Brooks. The screen unlocked. Dozens of encrypted folders appeared. Videos, financial records, secret emails, property deeds, bank transfers, everything connected to one organization, the Raven Foundation. But one folder caught Zara's attention. Its title was simple, If I Don't Survive. She opened it. A video began playing. Elena's final message. The recording showed a young woman sitting inside what looked like a motel room. She was tired, scared, but determined. She looked directly into the camera. My name is Elena Brooks. If you're watching this, it means I couldn't protect myself. But maybe I protected my daughter. She smiled through tears. Zara, if you found this, I'm already proud of you. She took a deep breath. The people chasing me aren't criminals anymore. They've become something much more dangerous. They have politicians, judges, police officers. They can erase records, change identities, make innocent people disappear. She paused. But they have one weakness. They trust the wrong man. Thomas suddenly leaned closer to the screen. I remember this. Elena continued. Someone inside the Raven Foundation has secretly been helping me. When the time is right, he'll know what to do. The video ended abruptly. Zara looked at Thomas. Who was she talking about? Thomas slowly shook his head. I don't know. But whoever that person is, they're still alive. A visitor in the night. It was nearly midnight. Rain hammered against the cabin windows. Suddenly, headlights appeared outside. A black luxury car stopped in front of the cabin. Thomas switched off every light. No one knows we're here. A slow knock echoed through the silence. Knock, knock, knock. Neither of them moved. Then a familiar voice came from outside. Zara, it's Detective Michael Carter. I need to speak with you. Thomas frowned. He shouldn't know this place. Zara slowly looked through the curtain. It really was Michael, standing alone. So why did Thomas suddenly whisper, Don't open that door? The detective's secret. The rain continued to pound against the cabin roof. Outside, Detective Michael Carter stood alone beneath a black umbrella. His coat was soaked. His face looked tense. He knocked again. Knock, knock. Zara, I know you're in there. We don't have much time. Inside the cabin, no one moved. Thomas quietly pulled Zara away from the window. Stay back, Zara whispered. He's the detective who investigated the bridge accident. He helped me. Thomas looked straight into her eyes. 25 years ago, I trusted the wrong person. I'm not making that mistake again. A difficult choice. Michael spoke again from outside. Zara, if you can hear me, I'm alone. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Thomas remained silent. Then he walked to the back of the cabin and looked through a small window. The forest was empty. No headlights. No movement. He turned back. If he came alone, let's hear what he has to say. Thomas carefully unlocked the door. The moment Michael entered, he quickly closed it behind him. His eyes moved around the room. Then they stopped on Thomas. So, you're alive. Thomas frowned. You know who I am. Michael nodded. I've spent 6 years looking for you. The hidden investigation. Michael removed a thick folder from inside his coat. It was wrapped in waterproof plastic. I couldn't keep this at the police station. Someone inside the department has been leaking information. He placed the folder on the table. Inside were dozens of photographs, maps, phone records, financial documents, and one familiar name written across several pages. Richard Cole. Zara looked up. My mother's former partner. Michael nodded. The man who betrayed her. Thomas sighed. I was hoping I was wrong. Michael looked confused. Wrong about what? Thomas answered quietly. Richard Cole isn't working for the Raven Foundation. He is the Raven Foundation. The man behind the mask. Thomas spread several old newspaper articles across the table. 25 years ago, Richard created dozens of fake charities. He promised to help poor families, build hospitals, support orphanages. But most of the money disappeared. Michael added, anyone who questioned him suddenly lost their job or their life. Zara looked at another photograph. It showed Richard standing beside several politicians. He looks respected. Michael gave a bitter smile. That's exactly how he survived. To the public, he's a philanthropist. Behind closed doors, he's one of the most dangerous men in the country. The missing driver. Michael opened another file. I finally found out who was driving the SUV the night you rescued Ethan. He placed a photograph on the table. The driver wasn't Daniel Harrison. It was a man named Lucas Grant. Who is he? Zara asked. Michael answered. He was Daniel Harrison's personal security chief. He disappeared immediately after the crash. Thomas narrowed his eyes. So he survived. Michael nodded. But here's the strange part. Yesterday, Lucas was found dead. The room fell silent. What happened? Zara whispered. Michael looked down. The official report says suicide. Thomas shook his head immediately. No. Richard is cleaning up loose ends. Ethan draws a picture. Michael reached into his folder again. This may seem unimportant, but I think it matters. He unfolded a child's drawing. Ethan had drawn the bridge, the SUV, and the black sedan, but something else caught Zara's attention. A symbol. The same raven emblem, painted on the side of the black car. Michael pointed to it. Ethan remembered this from the night of the accident. The sedan belonged to someone. We finally traced the logo. Zara looked up. It belongs to the Raven Foundation. Another piece of the puzzle. Thomas returned to Elena's journal. One page had been glued shut. Carefully, he separated the pages. A small photograph fell out. It showed Elena standing beside a young businessman. The man looked familiar. Very familiar. Zara stared at him. I've seen him before. Michael's face suddenly changed. Oh no! What? Zara asked. Michael swallowed hard. That's Daniel Harrison. The photograph had been taken 26 years earlier. Daniel and Elena were smiling, standing side by side, like close friends. Or perhaps, something more. Questions without answers. Zara couldn't understand. If Daniel knew my mother, why has he never said anything? Thomas looked troubled. Because either he has been hiding the truth, or he doesn't remember it. Michael frowned. How could someone forget something like this? Thomas didn't answer. Because he wasn't sure himself. A phone call in the dark. Late that night, Michael's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed immediately. It's Ethan. Michael answered. Hello. A frightened little voice came through the phone. It's not Daddy. What do you mean? Daddy left after dinner. He said someone called him. He never came back. Michael stood up. When was this? 3 hours ago. And now, there are strange men outside our house. The line suddenly filled with static. Then, a loud crash. Ethan screamed. The call disconnected. Michael grabbed his coat. We have to move. Thomas looked at Zara. Richard has made his next move. They don't just want the evidence anymore. They've taken Daniel Harrison. And if Daniel truly knew the final secret about Elena Brooks, he might not survive the night. The kidnapping and the truth about her father. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound inside the cabin was the rain pounding against the roof. Detective Michael Carter slipped his phone back into his pocket. His face had turned pale. Ethan sounded terrified. Thomas grabbed the leather journal and the folder of evidence. If Richard has taken Daniel, then we're running out of time. Zara looked at both men. We're not leaving Ethan alone. Michael nodded. Agreed. Within minutes, the three of them climbed into Michael's SUV and sped through the storm toward the Harrison estate. The empty mansion. The Harrison mansion was usually protected by private security. Tonight, the front gate stood wide open. Several security vehicles were parked outside. Their flashing lights illuminated the rain-soaked driveway. Michael stopped the SUV. Police officers rushed toward him. What happened? He asked. One officer answered. We arrived after a panic alarm was triggered. The staff is unharmed. But Daniel Harrison is gone. Michael frowned. What about Ethan? He's safe. One of the housekeepers hid him in the panic room. Relief washed over Zara's face. Ethan's story. A few minutes later, Ethan ran toward Zara the moment he saw her. Without saying a word, he hugged her tightly. I knew you'd come. Zara knelt beside him. You're safe now. Ethan nodded. Then his expression became serious. I saw the man. What man? The one who took my dad? Michael crouched beside him. Can you describe him? Ethan thought for a moment. He walked with a cane. Thomas suddenly froze. A cane. Ethan nodded. And he had a scar on his left cheek. Thomas's face lost all color. No! It can't be! Zara looked at him. You know who it is? Thomas whispered. I thought he was dead. The ghost from the past. Thomas sat down heavily. 25 years of memories flooded back. There was another man. He worked with Richard. His name was Victor Kane. He was Richard's closest friend. The man who carried out every order. Thomas closed his eyes. I watched Victor fall into the river while escaping the police. Everyone believed he drowned. But if he's alive, Richard was never working alone. A hidden message. Michael's radio suddenly crackled. We found something in Daniel Harrison's office. Within minutes, they arrived at Harrison Global Headquarters. Daniel's office had been turned upside down. Drawers were open. Documents were scattered everywhere. Someone had searched the room carefully. Then Zara noticed something unusual. A family photograph had fallen from the desk. Behind it, a folded piece of paper had been taped to the frame. Michael carefully unfolded it. Only one sentence was written. The answer is beneath St. Gabriel's Chapel. Thomas looked shocked. Daniel left this for us. Michael frowned. How do you know? Because only he knew about St. Gabriel's, the underground bunker. St. Gabriel's Chapel stood abandoned on the outskirts of a city. It had closed nearly 20 years earlier. When they arrived, the building was silent. Broken stained glass windows rattled in the wind. Thomas walked directly toward the old altar. He pushed aside a wooden bench. Hidden beneath, it was a steel hatch. Michael looked at him in surprise. You've been here before. Thomas nodded. Once. With Elena. The hatch opened. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. Below, they discovered an underground room. It wasn't a bunker. It was an archive. Metal shelves lined every wall. Boxes, files, photographs, tape recordings. Every shelf was labeled. Raven Foundation. Zara stared in disbelief. My mother collected all this. Thomas smiled sadly. She collected enough evidence to destroy them forever. The biggest surprise. While searching the archive, Zara found a locked wooden chest. Inside was another video cassette and several letters. One envelope immediately caught her attention. Across the front were the words, For Zara, about your father. Her hands trembled. She slowly opened it. Inside was a short handwritten letter. My sweet Zara, if you have reached this point, then you deserve to know the final truth. The man who raised you will always be your father. But the man who gave you life never knew you existed. I kept you a secret to protect you both. Please don't judge him until you know everything. Love. Mom. Zara looked up, confused. What does this mean? Thomas remained silent. Michael carefully opened the old videotape case. A label had been written by hand. Interview with Daniel Harrison, 25 years ago. The three of them stared at each other. Daniel Harrison. Again. The recording. They found an old tape player in the archive. Michael inserted the cassette. Static filled the screen. Then the image became clear. A much younger Daniel Harrison appeared. Across from him sat Elena Brooks. They weren't arguing. They were laughing, talking comfortably, like two people who cared deeply for one another. Then Daniel looked at Elena and smiled. I'll always protect you. Elena smiled back. I know. The video suddenly ended. The room fell silent. Zara's heart pounded. She whispered, My mother knew Daniel. Thomas lowered his head. I was hoping you'd never have to see that. Just then, a hidden speaker inside the archive crackled to life. A calm, familiar voice echoed through the underground room. Congratulations. You finally found the truth. The three of them spun around. The voice continued, but you're still asking the wrong question. There was a pause. Then the speaker delivered one sentence that changed everything. Daniel Harrison isn't your enemy. He's your father. The room fell into stunned silence. Zara couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Everything she believed about her past had just been shattered. The truth behind Elena and Daniel. The underground archive fell silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. The old speaker crackled once, then went dead. Zara stared at the blank wall in disbelief. Her mind refused to accept what she had just heard. Daniel Harrison is your father. The words echoed over and over inside her head. She slowly turned toward Thomas. Tell me, was that a lie? Thomas lowered his eyes. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Finally, he nodded. No, it's the truth. 26 years earlier, Thomas sat down on an old wooden chair. I've carried this secret for too long. He looked at Zara. 26 years ago, Daniel Harrison wasn't the man the world knows today. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't the CEO of Harrison Global. He was a young financial investigator. He believed in justice. And that's how he met your mother. A love built on trust. Daniel and Elena worked together to uncover financial crimes. They spent months investigating suspicious charities that were secretly laundering money for powerful criminals. Long nights became early mornings. Meetings turned into friendships. Friendships slowly became love. Thomas smiled faintly. They dreamed of getting married. They even talked about raising a family. Zara felt tears forming in her eyes. So, they loved each other? Thomas nodded. More than anything, Richard's betrayal. But someone else was watching. Richard Cole. At first, he pretended to help the investigation. In reality, he had secretly become the leader of the Raven Foundation. When he discovered Elena was pregnant, he realized one thing. If Daniel and Elena exposed him, everything he had built would collapse. So Richard created a plan. He forged documents. He manipulated evidence. He convinced Daniel that Elena had stolen confidential files and disappeared with millions of dollars. Daniel was devastated. He believed the lies. By the time he discovered the truth, Elena had already gone into hiding. And Zara had been born. Why Daniel never knew. Zara's voice trembled. Why didn't my mother tell him about me? Thomas sighed deeply. Because Richard was watching everyone. If Daniel had known about you, you would have become another target. So Elena made the hardest decision of her life. She disappeared, and she protected both of you. A father's regret. Michael searched through another box in the archive. Inside he found a sealed letter, addressed to Daniel Harrison. It had never been opened. Thomas handed it to Zara. I think he deserves to read this. Zara carefully unfolded the letter. It read, Daniel, if you ever receive this letter, it means I failed to tell you the truth myself. I never betrayed you. Everything Richard told you was a lie. We have a daughter. Her name is Zara. If anything happens to me, promise me only one thing. Love her enough for both of us. Elena. Tears rolled down Zara's face. For the first time in her life, she understood why her mother had disappeared. Richard's trap. Suddenly, Michael's phone vibrated. An unknown number. He answered. A calm voice spoke. Good evening, detective. Michael's expression hardened. Richard. The voice chuckled. Very good. I see you've reached the archive. You've learned the truth. But truth comes with consequences. Michael demanded. Where's Daniel? Richard laughed softly. If you want him alive, bring me the journal. And the memory chip. No police. No tricks. Tomorrow. Midnight. The old Riverside shipyard. The call ended. A difficult decision. Silence filled the archive. Michael looked at Zara. It's a trap. Thomas agreed. If we hand over the evidence, everything your mother sacrificed will be lost. But if we don't, Daniel may die. Zara closed her eyes. For 26 years, she had believed she had no biological family. Now, within a single day, she had discovered that her mother had loved her beyond measure, and her father was fighting for his life. She whispered, I'm not losing him too. Ethan's promise. Back at the Harrison mansion, Ethan was waiting. The moment Zara arrived, he ran toward her. Did you find my dad? She knelt and hugged him. We're going to bring him home. Ethan reached into his pocket. I found something. He handed her a small silver coin. On one side was the raven symbol. On the other, a tiny set of numbers. Doc 17. Michael stared at it. This isn't just a coin. It's an access token. Thomas nodded. Doc 17 is inside the old Riverside shipyard. Richard hadn't just given them a meeting place. Without realizing it, he had also revealed exactly where Daniel was being held, preparing for the final battle. Late that night, the four of them gathered around a large table. Maps of the shipyard were spread across it. Michael marked security cameras. Thomas identified hidden entrances he remembered from years ago. Zara quietly placed the memory chip and Elena's journal into a waterproof bag. She looked at both men. My mother risked everything to protect the truth. My father deserves a second chance. And Ethan deserves to grow up with his dad. She took a deep breath. We end this tomorrow. Outside, thunder echoed across the sky. Far away, inside an abandoned warehouse at Riverside Shipyard, Daniel Harrison sat tied to a metal chair. His face was bruised, but his eyes remained defiant. Richard Cole stepped out of the shadows. He smiled coldly. You'll finally meet your daughter tomorrow. He leaned closer. And then, you'll both disappear forever. The rescue at Dock 17. The old Riverside shipyard had been abandoned for nearly 15 years. Rusted cranes stood motionless against the night sky. Broken warehouses stretched along the riverbank like forgotten giants. The only sounds were the crashing waves and the distant rumble of thunder. At exactly 11:45 p.m., 3 unmarked vehicles stopped a quarter-mile from Dock 17. No headlights, no sirens, no unnecessary noise. Detective Michael Carter stepped out first. He unfolded a map of the shipyard and placed it on the hood of his SUV. Richard chose this place for a reason, he said quietly. He knows every entrance and every escape route. Thomas pointed to an old maintenance tunnel. 25 years ago, these tunnels connected every warehouse. If they're still open, we can get inside without being seen. Michael nodded. Good. He looked at Zara. Remember our plan. If anything goes wrong, you leave with the evidence. Zara shook her head. I'm not leaving anyone behind. Inside Warehouse 17, a single light bulb swung from the ceiling. Daniel Harrison sat tied to a steel chair. His face was bruised. One eye was swollen shut, but despite everything, he refused to lower his head. Richard Cole stood a few feet away, calmly pouring himself a cup of coffee. He smiled. You've always been stubborn, Daniel. Daniel stared at him. You destroyed countless lives. Richard shrugged. I built an empire. People only remember the winners. Daniel laughed bitterly. No, they remember the truth. Richard's smile disappeared. You still believe that? Daniel answered without hesitation. My daughter proved it. For the first time in years. Richard looked genuinely angry. The secret entrance. Meanwhile, Zara, Michael, and Thomas quietly crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel. The air smelled of rust and seawater. Water dripped from broken pipes overhead. Finally, Thomas stopped. He pointed upward. We're directly beneath Warehouse 17. Michael slowly pushed open the old hatch. Through a narrow gap, they could see Richard's men guarding the room. 6 armed guards. 1 exit. No room for mistakes. Michael whispered, I'll distract them. Thomas shook his head. Too dangerous. Before either man could stop her, Zara noticed something. A fire alarm control panel hung on the wall near the tunnel exit. She smiled. I have a better idea. Chaos. Zara pulled the emergency alarm. Immediately, red lights began flashing. Sirens echoed throughout the entire shipyard. Automatic sprinklers activated. Water poured from the ceiling. Richard's guards looked around in confusion. What happened? Check the electrical room. Half the guards rushed outside. Michael seized the opportunity. Go! Within seconds, the 3 of them climbed into the warehouse. Michael quietly disarmed the nearest guard. Thomas knocked another unconscious with his walking cane. Zara ran straight toward Daniel. She pulled a small knife from her pocket and cut the ropes around his wrists. Daniel looked at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he whispered, You have your mother's eyes. Tears filled Zara's eyes. And you are my father. Daniel smiled through the pain. I'm so sorry. For every birthday I missed. For every moment I didn't know you existed. Zara hugged him tightly. You came back. Daniel closed his eyes. I never stopped looking for the truth. Richard escapes. A gunshot echoed through the warehouse. Everyone turned. Richard had slipped through a side door. He's getting away! Michael shouted. The detective chased him through the maze of shipping containers. Rain poured harder than ever. Richard reached the edge of the dock. A speedboat waited below. He smiled. This isn't over, detective. Before he could jump, Thomas appeared. You've been running for 25 years. Richard raised his pistol. You should have stayed hidden. He pulled the trigger. Bang! Thomas pushed Michael out of the way. The bullet struck Thomas in the shoulder. He collapsed. No! Zara screamed. Richard laughed and jumped toward the boat, but as he landed, a powerful spotlight illuminated the dock. Dozens of police vehicles surrounded the area. Helicopters hovered overhead. Richard froze. Michael smiled. You always thought I came alone. Richard slowly looked around. Officers emerged from every direction. Weapons drawn. There was nowhere left to run. The final choice. Richard looked at the river behind him, then at the officers surrounding him. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. For the first time in 25 years, the man who had controlled everyone else had no control at all. Michael stepped forward. It's over. Richard smirked. No. He reached into his coat. Everyone thought he was reaching for another gun. Instead, he pulled out a small remote control. Thomas's eyes widened. The warehouse. Richard smiled coldly. If I lose, so does the evidence. He pressed the button. A loud electronic beep echoed from inside the building. Michael's face turned pale. Bomb! Everyone ran. Zara looked back. Inside the warehouse, Elena's journal, the memory chip, and decades of evidence were still lying on the table. Without thinking, she turned around and ran back inside. Zara! Daniel shouted, but she was already gone. The countdown had begun. 10, 9, 8. Inside the warehouse, Zara sprinted through the pouring water toward the table. She grabbed the journal, the memory chip, and the metal box. The countdown echoed through the building. 5, 4. She raced toward the exit. The doorway was only a few feet away. Then, a steel beam crashed from the ceiling, blocking her path. Smoke filled the room. Outside, Daniel watched helplessly. He took one desperate step forward. My daughter! The countdown reached. 1. Boom! A deafening explosion shook the entire shipyard. Flames shot into the night sky. The warehouse collapsed in a cloud of fire and smoke. Everyone stood frozen. Daniel dropped to his knees. Michael stared at the burning building. Thomas whispered through the pain. Please! Not again! No one could see inside the smoke. No one knew whether Zara had made it out alive. The truth finally set everyone free. The explosion lit up the night sky. Flames rose above the old shipyard as pieces of metal crashed into the river. For a few terrifying seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. Daniel Harrison stood frozen, staring at the burning warehouse. His heart pounded. His daughter, the daughter he had only just found, was still inside. Zara! He shouted. Ignoring the police officers holding him back, Daniel broke free and ran toward the flames. Michael Carter grabbed his arm. You can't go in. Daniel struggled desperately. She's my daughter. I just found her. I'm not losing her now. A miracle. Suddenly, someone stumbled out of the thick smoke, covered in dust, coughing heavily, holding a waterproof bag tightly against her chest. It was Zara. For a brief second, no one could believe it. Then Ethan screamed with joy. Zara! Daniel ran toward her without hesitation. He wrapped his arms around her. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. 26 years of separation, 26 years of unanswered questions, ended in one embrace. Zara smiled through tears. I couldn't let Mom's truth disappear. She lifted the waterproof bag. The evidence is safe. Everyone around them applauded. Even the police officers couldn't hide their smiles. Richard's last attempt. On the dock, Richard Cole realized everything was falling apart. The explosion had failed. The evidence had survived. His men had surrendered. Police surrounded him from every direction. Richard slowly backed toward the edge of the dock. Michael pointed his weapon. It's over, Richard. Richard laughed bitterly. You think you've won? You have no idea how powerful my friends are. Michael replied calmly. Not anymore. At that moment, dozens of black SUVs entered the shipyard. But they weren't Richard's men. They were agents from the National Financial Crimes Bureau. Behind them came officers from the Attorney General's office. For months, Michael had secretly shared evidence with a federal task force. Tonight, they had enough proof to arrest everyone connected to the Raven Foundation. Richard looked around. There was nowhere left to run. For the first time in 25 years, he was truly alone. He slowly dropped his weapon. Police officers handcuffed him. As they led him away, he looked at Zara. You think this changes the past? Zara met his eyes without fear. No, but it protects the future. Richard lowered his head. Those were the last words she ever spoke to him. The hospital reunion. Thomas Reed had been shot in the shoulder during the rescue. Fortunately, the bullet had missed every major artery. After emergency surgery, doctors expected him to make a full recovery. When Zara visited him, he smiled. "I promised your mother I'd keep you safe. I'm sorry I almost failed." Zara gently squeezed his hand. "You didn't fail. You gave me my family." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "I've waited 25 years to hear those words." The truth about Elena. Over the next few days, the recovered evidence led police to one final location, an isolated private medical facility that had operated under false records for years. When officers searched the building, they discovered dozens of people who had been held there illegally under fake identities. Among them was Elena Brooks. She was weak, older. Her hair had turned gray, but the moment she saw Zara, she recognized her instantly. "My little girl." Zara ran into her mother's arms. Both of them cried without saying a single word. Daniel arrived moments later. He stopped several feet away, his eyes filled with tears. "I thought I lost you forever." Elena slowly looked at him. "I never stopped loving you." Daniel walked toward her. For a long moment, the three of them stood together. A family that had been torn apart by lies, finally reunited by the truth. Justice. The evidence from the memory chip, Elena's journal, and the underground archive exposed the entire Raven Foundation. Over the following months, Richard Cole was convicted on multiple criminal charges and sentenced to life in prison. Victor Kane and several senior members of the organization were arrested. Corrupt officials, lawyers, and business executives who had protected the foundation were prosecuted. Millions of dollars in stolen funds were recovered and redirected to victims and charitable programs. The case became one of the largest corruption investigations in the country's history. A new beginning. 6 months later, the city held a ceremony on Riverside Bridge, the same bridge where everything had begun. The mayor stepped to the podium. One act of courage changed countless lives. He presented Zara with the Medal of Civilian Bravery. The crowd stood and applauded. Among them were Robert and Margaret, the parents who had raised her with unconditional love. Thomas Reed, smiling proudly. Daniel Harrison and Elena Brooks, standing side by side. And little Ethan, clapping louder than anyone else. After the ceremony, Ethan ran up to Zara. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Zara smiled. "Being brave doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you choose to do the right thing, even when you are." Ethan nodded. "I'll remember that." 1 year later, 1 year after the events at the shipyard, the old Raven Foundation no longer existed. In its place, Daniel and Elena established the Elena Brooks Foundation, dedicated to protecting whistleblowers, supporting orphan children, and helping victims of corruption rebuild their lives. Zara continued working as a nurse. She never sought fame. She never chased headlines. She simply returned to doing what she loved most, helping people. Sometimes patients recognized her from the news. Sometimes they didn't. It never mattered to her. Because true heroes don't act for recognition. They act because someone needs them. Epilogue. One quiet evening, Zara stood alone on Riverside Bridge. The river flowed peacefully beneath her. The storm that had changed her life was long gone. She looked down at the silver necklace around her neck. For 26 years, it had been a mystery. Now it was a reminder of a mother's sacrifice, a father's redemption, a family's reunion, and the courage it takes to choose hope over fear. She smiled as the sun broke through the clouds. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can uncover the biggest truth. And sometimes, saving one life can change your own forever. The end.